Israel has a right to defend itself. Iran cannot have, as though they are, as though they're a part of the, Republican Party in the United States of America, as though they're Trump loyalists here. The United States has officially entered the Iran conflict by bombing key nuclear sites, 3 of them in particular. This happened yesterday, and it was the most telegraphed bombing campaign of all time. And yet it still had the capacity to catch us by surprise somehow, because it was such a severe, escalation that Israel has fantasized about, that American leadership has fantasized about for decades at this point. But it was obvious that it was going to happen. And they also sent in decoys to do like diversion techniques, diversion tactics. But ultimately, there were some people, myself included, that said that this was going to happen this weekend, going after the analysis of like people who are well-resourced or well-sourced that still have motion. Seymour Hersh being the person that I'm, of course, talking about here. The legendary journalist Seymour Hersh was one of the few journalists that was even talking about America definitely striking Iran. The 2 weeks notion was obviously a smokescreen, as I talked about extensively, and it should not come as a surprise to you. When he said 2 weeks, what did we say here? I said over and over again, it's not going to be 2 weeks. It's going to be this weekend, because he's just saying 2 weeks, because everything he says is just a misdirection. Everything he says is a misdirection, and that it was inevitable that it was going to happen this weekend, and it did. Okay? Baba lütfen bağırmayın.
Films a plume of smoke near the Fordo underground site. He claims there's no sign of major damage to the facility. But last night, the US struck Iran's 3 uranium enrichment plants using missiles and huge bunker busters. This was their main and most challenging target, the Fordo nuclear site, built deep underneath a mountain near the holy city of Qom. Satellite images from today show signs of possible damage. President Trump's decision to attack is one of the most consequential of his political career.
Thank you very much.
He struck a triumphal
Thank you for the
tone.
50 gifted subs.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success.
By the way, remember what I said yesterday when we were talking about servile nations? Remember when I said the Gulf is bad, right? The Gulf leadership is bad. They're dogs to America, Turkey included. You know, all these NATO countries like Turkey, they speak a big game against Israel, but they still absolutely follow the American line, right? Tooth and nail. But then I said there are, however, a group of countries that consider themselves to be sovereign. They consider themselves to be a sovereign nation, and that group of countries is not sovereign whatsoever. They are servile, and that is the European Union, okay? European countries on the European continent have demonstrated once again how little dignity and how little autonomy they truly have. Keir Starmer, Canada also came out as well. Only a couple weeks ago, they were talking extensively about how they wanted to decouple from America, at least on the optics front, against Israel, stating that what Israel was doing was untenable, unmanageable. When European leaders act as though they are a group of sovereign states, they are lying to their citizens. When they act as though they are bastions of liberal democracy, they are the upholders of liberal democracy, they are lying to their citizens. They are trying to keep up appearances, and that mask is slipping. They are all but vassals for Western empire and its interests, and that much is clear. Once again, I told you. And that is precisely the reason why you heard every single Western leader come out and go, Israel has a right to defend itself. Iran cannot have nukes, as though they're a part of the, Republican Party in the United States of America, as though they're Trump loyalists here. When America says jump, Every other country says, how high? Okay? Maybe they agree with the U.S. If they agree with the U.S., why were they at least trying to acknowledge and wash away the broad discontent that their countries' populations have towards America and Israel? Do you think that European capitals are ecstatic about American dominance? Do you think that people living in Europe are excited that their leaders literally go to the United States of America and have to bow down to a pathetic man, bow down to a man who's like a child, bow down to an idiot like Donald Trump, who doesn't even do the game of diplomacy in the way that at least like previous leaders have done to make it seem as though everyone has a say in this process? No, they don't like that. European leadership understands that there is tremendous discontent with this undying loyalty towards America. And also, more importantly than that, European leaders recognize that there is a tremendous amount of discontent towards Israel amongst the population. Okay? The populations in even European capitals now are frustrated. They're fired up. They're angry. They're resentful about the unlimited support that their leadership has offered to Israel, a foreign nation. So when that kind of public distaste is happening endlessly over and over again, in order to maintain the notion of democracy, the idea that there is some sort of like liberal democracy happening, European leaders have to respond. And in that response, they try to make it seem as though they are kind of trying to separate from America. They're punishing Israel, right? They're critical of Israel, but they're not. They're not critical of Israel. And this kind of action from America and Israel basically hits the reset for all of our politicians and your politicians in Europe as well, and politicians all around the world. It is shocking to me. It is shocking to me that there was such little anti-war statements in the buildup to this highly telegraphed bombing campaign. Like, I thought at least there would be some people that hit the partisan notes and say things like, oh, why are we bombing Iran? Why is Israel bombing Iran? They're opening an eighth front? Really? Like, don't they have their hands full killing Palestinian children every day, which they have not stopped, by the way? As Senator Chris Van Hollen from the Democratic Party posted 2 days prior, since Israel started bombing Iran, Israel has also killed 400 Palestinians, almost all of them at the fake aid sites that they've created with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, a fake aid site created by both of the belligerents, the United States of America and Israel, to do perfidy, which is illegal, trickery, and aid distribution. Having a military mechanism is completely illegal. And that is what Israel and America are doing in Gaza right now. The Strait of Hormuz has been closed. So yeah, my expectation is that Iran is going to do something. I thought it would be limited. We shall see. So far, they have not done any sort of like imminent retaliation to American bases and American assets in the region. They've only spoken about how they are going to take the legal route in terms of the proliferation stuff. So we shall see. We shall see where they go with this. But their statements have been restrained thus far. Their statements signal restraint. Statements such as, "Oh, this attack actually wasn't that big of a deal for us," or even the Iranian Atomic Energy Agency coming out and making a statement about how they will pursue legal options. The most militant statement that I have read so far from that side, from the Iranian, not like the Iranian side, but like necessarily the Iranian, the Iranian allegiance, has been from Russia. Well, although this right here is interesting, Russia, China, Pakistan proposed draft UN security. These are the only allies that Iran has in the region, right? aside from the axis of resistance. They propose a draft at the UN Security Council resolution calling for an immediate unconditional ceasefire in the Middle East. I wonder if this package will include Israel. I suspect that Iran is interested in blocking the Strait of Hormuz, and U.S. now wants China to join in on the fray, get involved, and only to prevent Iran from closing the Strait of Hormuz and disrupting global oil flows. But yeah, this is what I was going to say. This has been the most consequential statement from Dmitry Medvedev, deputy chair of the Security Council of the Russian Federation. This is the most militant thing I've heard from, I guess, like the Iranian side. What the frick is going on? Is my computer getting bricked or something? What is this? Okay. What have the Americans accomplished with their nighttime strikes on 3 nuclear sites in Iran? 1, critical infrastructure of the nuclear been unaffected or sustained only minor damage. 2, the enrichment of material, and now we can say it outright, the future production of weapons will continue. A number of countries are ready to directly supply Iran with their own warheads. Now, this is a very big escalation in terms of the language being used. No Iranian leadership has said anything of the sort so far, but Russia's statements here, I would go so far as to say, are even more significant than Iran. But this is Medvedev, so I don't know if this is all that consequential. Like, it would be definitely a little bit, it would be more impactful if it was Lavrov, or if it was obviously Vladimir Putin, something along those lines. But this is basically the most militant statement that I have heard so far. And I think Russian statements, not Medvedev, okay, but Russian statements coming from Russian envoys, make no mistake, are more important than even the Iranian leadership in terms of understanding where this conflict might go. Listen to me. Trusting Russian talk? No. You listen. Russian statements on this, okay? Russian statements on this event, on events that unfold in the Middle East, is more consequential because it is a way to understand. It is a way to understand what this axis that is developing, or what this unified front that is developing against American imperialism in the region, what direction they may lead down. Because the Iranian side, there's differences in opinion, obviously. Like, the IRGC is more militant. The Islamic Republic and the civil governance side is infinitely more restrained, infinitely more diplomatic. Russia still, however, is the big dog. So when Medvedev, albeit says something insane, it could signal which direction Russia is heading down. Whoa, Kaya. Jesus Christ. Fiona came and she immediately ran out. Okay, hold on. I'm gonna let her out. Go. My brother and his fiance is here. And as predicted, as I said yesterday, China, once again, the strongest of condemnations. Oh boy, what a condemnation. The strongest you've ever heard. Classic. Yeah. Just wait till China actually condemns Iran for blocking the Strait of Hormuz, if they actually do so. Okay? But in any case, let's keep going through the Medvedev statement. The enrichment of material, like, this is obviously an insane statement because he goes, and now we can outright say it. Future production of weapons will continue, implying that Iran was already in the process of developing weapons. This is not true. There is no evidence for this, right? There's no evidence for this whatsoever. So when he says that, that's the embellished part. But it's also important to recognize, like, which direction the Russian state might be heading down. Like, he says he goes 110% of the way, but the Russian government might be leaning in the, 40%, 50% of the way. Whereas the Iranian government, and what the Iranian government is saying is seemingly incredibly restrained, if that makes sense. Do you see what I mean? Do we have any of this verified by Iran? Why not get it from the horse's mouth? this is, I would say, not Medvedev, but like I would be on the lookout in this situation to hear what Russia will say. I think Russia's statements here will be the most impactful ones. Okay? Russia's statements will show which direction this conflict will go. Russian actions will show which direction this conflict will go, because Russia's actions and Russia's statements, not Medvedev, the state, okay? The actual state, not this guy, but the state itself and which direction they head here will either broaden this conflict, in a way that turns into like a Iraq style situation, or will potentially stamp out or will basically exhaust Israel to a degree where they won't be able to continue doing all of this nonsense, all of this madness, and will create an environment where there will be a managed negotiation to stamp out further Israeli aggression in the region, or potentially get America fully invested in implementing its grand design in the region and try to destabilize the Iranian regime, because that is the goal here. As I have said, the ultimate goal here is not the program. Nobody gives a about the program. Please stop talking about the program. If you want to understand what the actual goal here is, the goal has always been the same since Benjamin Netanyahu said Iran has, or the capacity to build, since like 84 or something, or whenever the Israeli state started claiming that Iran had, okay? The goal has always been regime change, or the casus belli, okay? I think it was 1992 when Benjamin Netanyahu first said it, but I'm saying that like they have entertained regime change for since the revolution started. I told you, Iran's foreign minister says he will, this was last night, actually, I think. Yeah. Iran's foreign minister says he will head to Moscow today and will meet Putin. So this is probably taking place right now. Do I personally think Iran should have, if Iran had, none of this would be happening and the region would be an infinitely more stable region. It would be more stable in the direction that America doesn't want, though. It would be a region that had more stability because the countries in the region would have more power and more influence and more sovereignty over their own affairs. The only way to basically scale back Israeli aggression in this region is for there to be sovereign states, and there is no sovereignty unless you are outside of the banner of American influence. You do not have any sort of sovereignty whatsoever unless you have. I'm sure that many of you have figured it out by now, but there is perhaps a reason why nobody does this to North Korea. You know what I mean? But they do this, and have done this successfully, the countries that they've said have, or WMDs, like Iraq, like Libya. Okay? Pakistan probably looks at everything that's going on right now and goes, oh my God, what an amazing thing we did. Okay? Thank Christ. Thank Christ for that guy who came from the Netherlands and built this goddamn thing in a cave like Iron Man. Okay? What was the name of the dude? Hold on. Let me see if I can find the name of the dude. Was it Dr. Abdus Salam? Or no, Khan? Abdul Qadir Khan? Yeah, Abdul Qadir Khan, a metallurgist working on centrifuge enrichment for Urenco, joined the program at the behest of the Bhutto administration by the end of 1974. How it be a deterrent, though? It's not like they'll use them, no? Yes, the whole point of having is to never use them. The whole point of having is that they will never use on you. That's the whole point. Because here's the reality. If you have, then other countries that have will nuke you if you use your... And therefore, when you get this, you're not supposed to use the... Okay? The entire purpose of getting this is so you don't get nuked. The threat of using this is what is at the heart of the mutually assured... that is the reason why so many countries have engaged in proliferation. I'm a firm and committed believer into, as the NPT suggests is supposed to happen, but I think we all know it's not happening anytime soon. Abdus Salam was the other guy who founded the program but was kicked out of Pakistan because of his religion. His grave was also later desecrated on. That's crazy. Anyway, here is Mossad's very own, IDF's very own Barak Ravid, Netanyahu at a press conference, who Trump personally called and said, your Israel is safe now. Remember that. This guy's gotten awards from every American journalistic enterprise. Barak Ravid, literally an agent of Israel, like straightforwardly. He is. I'm sorry. I know he works at Axios, but Donald Trump called him last night after bombing Iran and said directly to him, your Israel is safe. Anyway, Netanyahu at a press conference says, we will not be dragged into a war of attrition. When we achieve our goals, the fighting will stop. Okay. Well, as I said, when Netanyahu says something like that, just assume the opposite if you want to be right 90% of the time, as opposed to being right 10% of the time. When Netanyahu says something, it means the exact opposite. So he wants to do a war of attrition. Netanyahu said, oh, this will last 2 weeks. That's how you know it was going to be longer than that. Donald Trump says, oh, we want diplomacy. That's how you know it's not going to be diplomacy. Yeah, he said that about October. He said that on October 8th about Gaza, too. Oh, all right. But
Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated. Iran, the bully of the Middle East, must now make peace.
Other satellite images from recent days show cargo trucks near Fordo. Iranian officials have said all enriched uranium had already been moved.
But HasanAbi, why would Iran be super aggressive when the only way they can really win is maintain the regime? Trump attacking nuclear sites doesn't really do anything. It's just promoting American weapons, really. And Iran has zero allies in the region other than Yemen. Why would they attack the U.S. and risk American support for regime change up 50%? It'd be a bad move. Great question. Here's the answer. Iran is a part of a American-caused an American-caused new world order that is being implemented, okay? You have Iran, China, Russia on one side as regional players, and China being the head of the axis, if you want to call it that. And then you have America and the entire Western nations on the other side alongside Israel, okay? Turkey is obviously a part of American, the American side as well. So if Iran recognizes that destabilization is a necessity or is a part of America's goals here, like decapitation potentially, either it happens tomorrow or it happens a week from now or it happens a month from now or it happens 5 years from now, it will inevitably happen. Okay? It will inevitably happen. So if they want sovereignty and if they want to basically try and stop the bleeding, either this happens with death by 1,000 cuts, a war of attrition, or they increase the intensity and make themselves an undeniable force in the region. And the only way to do that is by forcing Russia and China's hand into defending Iran. Considering how valuable of an asset Iran is to both of these countries, the fact that they've basically all but written off Iranian sovereignty in this process is actually quite shocking to me. Are there not sanctions to put on these other nuclear powers like Pakistan and Russia that would limit how they supply nuclear arms to each other? Yes. But considering that there is a secondary network of a secondary market that was cultivated as a direct consequence of America's sanctions regime and the way that America weaponizes SWIFT, you already have a lot of these countries that are not entirely in the sphere of American influence working around that and actively looking for alternatives and actively creating an organically created secondary market. Remember, America has designed sanctions in its sanctions regime in such a way that there is literally now a robust secondary market that can't even work within the global marketplace, because America already has hit them with like ridiculous restrictions to begin with. When you sanction everyone, you technically are just sanctioning yourself. And that's precisely what America has done. With the exception of like Western Europe, America's basically been like, you can't enter the Western European markets, which are very important, and you can't enter the American market, which is very important. These are consumer markets, okay? But when you do that, you inevitably create a secondary market of all of the people that have been sanctioned, and the sanctions that come down later are nowhere near as consequential or as impactful, because there is now a network that has been forcibly designed against said sanctions. Anyway, what I was trying to say, though, what I was talking about with respect to Iran here is that obviously, if Iran continues to show restraint, I think America will, if they stamp it out right now, even if they do quote unquote fake diplomacy in the interim, in the short term, they will inevitably do destabilization and regime change in the long term. And I think the Iranian government has to recognize that. So the actions that they take from this point on will be for their sovereignty. It won't just be for the regime's continuation, which is definitely the truth. That is definitely a significant factor in their calculation, but it's also for Iranian sovereignty in general.
The regime has reacted angrily. Trump had previously suggested he would wait 2 weeks to see if diplomatic efforts could reach a resolution.
The door for diplomacy should be always keep open, but this is not the case right now. My country has been under attack, under aggression, and we have to respond.
Iran's initial response: 2 barrages of ballistic missiles fired at Israel this morning. One hit this residential area of Tel Aviv.
I will say, one of the smarter things that Iran could do right now is to feint and make it seem like they're hitting American targets, but then continue hitting Israel, which is, again, an American target technically. This way, you get to avoid you basically get to avoid creating a permission structure for further battles with Iran, because then you're like, well, we're hitting Israel, like we're not hitting America, we're just hitting Israel. What do you mean? And then it makes it a little bit more difficult for Trump and everybody else to fucking turn around and be like, no, we're going to the war. We're going to the war to defend Israel. However, make no mistake, America clearly does not need that permission. It does not need permission from its public. It does not need the majority opinion to be on board with going to war with Iran. That much was demonstrated last night.
A nursing home for the elderly and an apartment block were banned.
This, I suspect, if Iran is invested in its own sovereignty, this, I suspect, has actually created a permission structure for Iran to develop nukes, to actually develop nukes, to actually work on a nuclear proliferation. If they don't do that at this point, they are insane, for the record. If they still think that there is a peaceful solution, that there is any sort of diplomatic solution with the West, they are delusional.
Badly damaged, with dozens of people injured. Israel has reimposed its highest state of alert as Iran weighs up its next move.
There's been damage here and in other sites across Israel this morning, but everyone's bracing for further Iranian strikes.
Gura and his family have had to leave their home, but he's hoping Trump's actions could end the conflict.
You worried that things could get even worse now, or?
I don't know. I don't think so. I think it's going to a closing point more than an opening one, but we'll see.
Israel's Air Force said today it had destroyed more Iranian missile launchers as well as Iranian fighter jets. Israel's attacks have severely weakened Iran's military capabilities. But Iran could still choose to launch strikes on US bases in the region or close the strategic Straits of Hormuz. Doing so would incur major retaliation.
There will be either peace or there will be tragedy for Iran far greater than we have witnessed over the last 8 days. Remember, there are many targets left.
These were the tense moments in the White House Situation Room last night. What happens next in this conflict is now in Iran's hands.
Well, the Trump administration has been making it clear in its messaging that its aim in Iran is not regime change, that it wants to enter into negotiations. Iran's regime faces a difficult dilemma. It's already deeply unpopular at home. It's invested billions into this nuclear program and will feel compelled, I think, to respond militarily in some way. But further direct confrontation with the US could lead to the regime's downfall. Adding to the pressure, Israel's attacks on Iran still appear to be continuing.
Thank you, Sikandar. Well, let's get the latest on the US reaction now from our Washington correspondent, Siobhan Kennedy. Siobhan.
Well, Kieran, it was only Thursday. Remember that the president said he'd give himself another 2 weeks to decide whether or not to attack Iran. And yet here we are 2 days later, and American bombers have already completed their mission, a mission which, by the way, he announced in a social media post yesterday.
Yeah, that photo was so whack because that was them. That was them trying to aura farm. Like, they wanted to do the Barack Obama, the iconic Barack Obama Situation Room post. Like 100%. I mean, they take photos like that all the time. But I know Trump is such a catty bitch with a penchant for drama and an eye for like theater and art like that. He cares about the aesthetics of things like that, which is precisely why they took these photos, right? They took these fucking photos in the Situation Room, and it, I think, had the opposite intention. He wanted to have like an iconic Obama style aura farming Situation Room photo. And I think it backfired spectacularly because he's wearing that whack ass hat and it looks like you're a clown. Like, you look like a clown. Even on the optics front, you're failing to farm aura. You look like Ronald McDonald, man. Take the goddamn hat off. What is this? You look ridiculous. That's the silly side of this, but you know, it's something that he cares about. So,
Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Kane, and they gave some very interesting details of how the mission played out yesterday, including the fact that the Pentagon used what they're calling decoy planes to try and confuse Iran. Viewers may not be aware, they may be, that yesterday there were reports of planes heading across the Pacific. But the Pentagon said that they were designed to confuse Iran, but really B-2 jets then went east, apparently undetected. The mission was dubbed Operation Midnight Hammer. It was the first use ever of these massive bunker buster bombs in conflict. We know that 7 B-2 bombers carried out the strikes and that they were protected by fighter jets that went ahead of them. They dropped a total of 14 of these bunker buster bombs in all, while more than 24 Tomahawk missiles were fired from a US submarine. The Defense Secretary, like everyone else, has insisted this is not about regime
down to the name, the Midnight Hammer
change, that this was a precision strike that was never intended to be open-ended. Let's hear from him now.
Every American involved in this operation performed.
Oh my God, this was the other side of like clown world. Pete Hegseth was like, wasn't I a good, brave boy? He came out and was like, hey, I didn't leak anything this time. I could not believe it. When I saw that tweet of Pete Hegseth being like, see, I guess I don't leak everything. You guys called me Leak Hegseth. Turns out this time I didn't leak anything. It's like, and there are people who are glazing him as the Secretary of Defense for doing basic OPSEC that would make the lowest level security clearance engineer fired from any position. You couldn't be the Jan Lockheed Martin facility if you were operating like Pete Hegseth is, and he thinks this is an impressive feat. What an incredible, yeah, look, no leaks. 33,000 likes on this no leaks post. Like, what is going, like, Republicans are so stupid. They are so dumb. It feels like later down the line, we're going to be like, well, he's a big boy. He didn't piss his pants. A lot of you were making fun of the administration for doing poopies in their pants, but now they have diapers. Think about that. Think about how impressive that is, that now they're doing poopies and peepees, but in their diapers. They're big boys, and maybe one day they can get potty trained. What the? No leaks. How much further can we go? What is the bottom? I want to know what the bottom is, because the very fact that people are celebrating big boy Secretary of Defense Leak Hegseth for not leaking this mission means that there is still more room. There is still a further depth that we have not reached. We have not reached. The bar is incredibly low, but it can go lower, baby. I want to know. I want Republicans talking about how Trump is so amazing. He was able to deliver a speech. He was able to use words. I want to see them talk about how brave and beautiful our president is because he's not pooping in his pants.
Flawlessly. And I want to give recognition to our allies in Israel as well. This is a plan that took months and weeks of positioning and preparation so that we could be ready when the President of the United States called. It took a great deal of precision. It involved misdirection and the highest of operational security.
Well, they're all very confident about the strikes, but this is, of course, a massive gamble for President Trump, a gamble that's already caused a big divide inside the Republican Party between those who are going along with the president and believe the strikes were the right thing to do, and those more hardline MAGA Republicans who did not want to see the U.S. involved in another war in the Middle East. And yet here we are today.
Thank you, Siobhan. Well, the UN chief has warned of a direct threat to international security, while here Sir Keir Starmer has called for a return to diplomacy instead of...
See, they're doing it already. Thoughts on it beats Joe Biden's speeches in his diapers? You're doing it. Oh my God, you're doing it. Oh my God, you are literally doing the thing. Oh my God, you're doing it. I said, how much lower can we go? And instantly, there's a hog in the chat. There's a hog in the chat that starts squealing. Oh, excuse me. Brandon pooped in his diapers. I know, dumbass. Was I on board with that? No. So why are you on board with your president doing that? Amazing. Amazing. He's like, well, Biden was doing pee-pee and poo-poo in his diapers. Awesome.
Any dangerous escalation. A succession of US officials have insisted they do not seek war with Iran, but what is likely to happen next? Here's Harry Fawcett.
Last night, on President Trump's orders, U.S. Central Command conducted a precision strike in the middle
At the Pentagon today, the U.S. Defense Secretary hailed what he called an incredible and overwhelming success. The reverberations focusing minds of America's adversaries and allies alike.
Well, we've long had concerns about the Iranian nuclear program and been very clear that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon.
Did you hear that Iranian officials were in talks with Trump to go forward with these attacks to keep Israel at bay? What? Iranian officials were in talks with Trump to go forward with these attacks to keep Israel at bay. I think that's copium coming from Trump world to make it seem like this was pre-established. What do you mean to keep Israel at bay? If America wants to keep Israel at bay, it takes a phone call. There is no world where like America has to also involve themselves directly in this. America is already involved in this because Israel is involved in this. The notion that like this was pre-established is a misunderstanding of a position that the Iranian government revealed, which was that America gave Iran information ahead of time, like I think a couple hours prior, that they were going to bomb these places. That's like, I don't know the veracity of that. I saw that flying around, and I think people probably misunderstood that. But also, why would Iran, or why would anybody trust America? Like, not just Iran. Why would anybody trust America or Israel? When have they been honest? In the past 2 weeks, there has only been dishonesty. Okay? They are the ones, they're the ones who were like, excuse me, we're doing diplomacy, denuclearization right now. Just kidding. Israel blew you up, and we totally wanted that. Yeah, that was great. That was great diplomacy. Also, 2 weeks. We still need to do diplomacy. Just kidding. We're blowing yourselves. Great diplomacy once again. Oh, deception and war, no way. Yeah, that's also, oh my God. Diapers are meant to be pooped in, though. Deception and war. There is no war, dumbass. The whole point of negotiations is so that there isn't a war. That's my point. You can't use my point and be like, deception and war? No way. Yeah, there's a term for that. Are we in war? Is this a war? I mean, I think it is. I agree. But that's not what they're signaling. That's not what they've been saying. That's the whole point. The entire purpose of negotiations is to avoid a war. Saying that there is a negotiations process taking place to create a protective cover for first strike attacks from your violent attack dog in the region is not actually deception. It's just called lying. It's called being a piece of shit. It's called wanting to do war and lying to your own population, lying to the Western world, and lying to the other side so that you can strike them. It's so stupid that we're just, when Trump does it, it's like, nah, it's good, actually.
The US has now taken action to alleviate that.
And look at this worm, dude. God damn it. Kid starver, dude. God, he is such a spectacularly cucked creature. Okay?
Threat. It is important that we now de-escalate the situation.
So Keir Starmer then more descriptive than supportive of the strikes. Emmanuel Macron expressing concern and urging restraint ahead of an emergency cabinet meeting this evening. Russia has called it an irresponsible violation of international law. Strong condemnation too from China. Closer to the heart of it all, Saudi Arabia talking of great concern, Oman of the threat now of a wider war. Key to it all, of course, what Iran does next. Iran has retaliated before, notably in 2020 after the US assassination of the Iranian general Qasem Soleimani. A wave of Iranian missiles struck Al-Assad air base in Iraq. More than 100 US military personnel suffered traumatic brain injuries from the blasts. But Al-Assad is one of many US military locations in the region which come within range of Iran's ballistic missiles. For months, the US has been hardening its anti-missile defense capabilities to protect them. Iran could utilize proxies such as Kataib Hezbollah in Iraq. Already, the US has withdrawn diplomatic staff from its Baghdad embassy in case of an attack there. Iran's Houthi allies could also reactivate their campaign against shipping at the entrance to the Red Sea, as they'd threatened to do if the US attacked Iran. More consequential to the global economy, Iran's own potential to shut down traffic through the Strait of Hormuz or strike oil industry infrastructure in neighboring Gulf states. But after more than a week of Israeli strikes, Iran's capabilities have been constrained. Israel says it's destroyed half of Iran's missile launchers. And Iran has already fired hundreds of missiles, depleting its arsenal. Iran's regime may want to calibrate its response carefully, aware of the risk of further escalation to the prospects of its own survival. Its senior figures targeted, its regional strategy of proxies and power projection in tatters. But what of its longer-term response to these strikes on its nuclear sites? The foreign minister today questioning the value of remaining in the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. A clear option remains now an entirely clandestine effort to obtain a nuclear weapon.
Well, here the Prime Minister is chairing a meeting of the government's emergency Cobra group. Earlier, I spoke to Cabinet Minister Jonathan Reynolds and I asked him, was President Trump right to bomb Iran?
We support the prevention of the Iranian...
No way. No way. You mean to tell me every single Western leader is coming out with statements of support for bombing Iran? What? Which, by the way, and this is, I guess, important for those who still care about these things, is a violation of numerous treaties and also a war crime. Okay? Make no mistake, you cannot just go and bomb nuclear sites and nuclear facilities. You can't do that amidst a negotiation process. You can't do that at all in general. It's up when Russia does it. It's up when America does it. Except the difference is when America does it, everyone goes, oh no, it was so sick. Yeah, look. We play jihadi rules, which there are no rules. Dude, if you knew anything at all, if you understood how things have unfolded so far, you would recognize that, first of all, the jihadi rules is really funny, but the people that you consider the jihadis, okay, have been infinitely more diplomatic and infinitely more restrained than both Israel and the United States of America. Okay? I hope they draft you, by the way. I hope you get drafted, straight up. Have fun. Have fun with those jihadi Shahed drones flying overhead. You will never get health care. You will never get a college education. You will never be able to own a home. And you will die for Israel. What a spectacular future for a bunch of cackling hyenas in this goddamn country. Just a bunch of angry losers who are like, oh yeah, hell yeah, we got to do force projection all the time, baby. All around the world. Hell yeah. Can't wait to go and get my ship blown up by a Shahed drone or maybe some Dongfang missiles. All I wanted was a college degree so I could maybe purchase a home one day after getting a communications degree from college paid for by the goddamn government. You know, something that is provided to citizens all around the world unconditionally by governments that are infinitely more interested and invested in improving their labor force and making them more productive. Awesome.
Regime having a nuclear weapon. We'd obviously proposed, as other Europeans, full diplomatic means in order to try and get to that objective. That was opposed not least by the Iranians themselves, and this has been the consequences of it.
A few hours ago, in the early hours of this morning, the British government was opposed to the US bombing Iran. President Trump went and did it. Do you think that was the right thing to do? Because a few hours ago you thought it wasn't.
Look, we wanted a diplomatic, peaceful means, but I can't possibly tell you anything other than Iran must...
We wanted diplomatic, peaceful means? Brother, America has openly stated that diplomacy was just a cover to do this. What do you mean we wanted diplomatic, peaceful? Like, at least condemn the goddamn American state. What is this? We need to bomb Iran, but legally take... Like, every single politician basically still serves the exact same role, which is to normalize the belligerent and insane, violent nature of America and Israel. Okay? They all act as though they care about diplomacy. They all act as though they care about negotiations. They think you're stupid. They think you're too stupid. And there are some who are. Okay? There are definitely a lot of people who are stupid. But you should know that negotiations were taking place when America's interest in these negotiations were to simply use it as a cover for an Israel first strike and then a subsequent American first strike on Iranian nuclear facilities. Okay? Recognize this, please. And I hope many of you in here recognize this reality. But every single outlet, whether they are liberal, every single politician, whether they are leftist, liberal, wherever they are in the world, are currently unified on this. There are very few places that will tell you exactly what is going on. Every single outlet has been fantasizing about this opportunity for decades now. And once it has unfolded, once it finally happened, and Trump was responsible for it, everyone is saying, oh, well, we wanted diplomacy, but I guess, Iran just made it impossible. It's like, no, America had no interest in diplomacy. America had no interest in diplomacy. It is ridiculous.
Not have a nuclear weapon.
So is it the UK intelligence assessment that Iran was weeks away from having a nuclear weapon?
I cannot give you a timeline on.
Iran didn't submit to Trump, and now Khomeini is hiding in a cave. Khomeini is dead. Khomeini is dead. He's been dead for quite a while, actually. You know? To the extent this is the extent of your knowledge on what's going on.
On that, but it is absolutely our view that Iran was developing a nuclear weapon. I don't think anyone has the view.
President Trump said weeks away. That, we understand, is the premise for dropping these bombs. So it's quite important to know whether the UK government thinks Iran was weeks away or not from having a
I do not
bomb.
have information that relates to what the President has said.
Did Sir Keir Starmer, to your knowledge, offer any kind of support to President Trump in this action?
No request from the Americans for UK military involvement or the use of UK military assets was a part of this, and our position has been to try and achieve these ends by peaceful diplomatic means.
You've talked about the threat of Iranian-backed terror groups to people here in the UK. That's probably the thing that's most on the minds of our audience today. Is that threat greater today because of this action?
No. I mean, the threat is so consistent. It is that threat that would shape our response to the possibility of the Iranian...
Yeah, dude, the Iranian threat is so persistent to England. What are you saying? Like, what do you mean? What are you saying? Do you hear yourself? No, these countries are infinitely more threatened by Israel than Iran. What the f are we talking about? They are under threat. They have no sovereignty because America has designed the world in a way where these are just servile states. That's all they got. The notion that like Iran presents a significant threat to England is so psychotic. Your sovereignty was not taken away from you by Iran. That was America. Okay? Your interest in maneuvering in these conflicts in a way that actually steps away from the United States was not taken away from you, or steps away from Israel's opinions, was not taken away from you by Iran. It was taken away from you by Israel and all of the pro-Israeli groups that have taken root in every facet of British politics, just as they have taken root in every facet of American politics. The notion that America is not aligned with Israel and that Israel is basically an extension or the tip of the spear of American empire, that's true. This is real. But Israel also, because of its valuable position as a forward operating base for America, has been able to slowly but surely take the advisory role in a more meaningful capacity, where all of the naysayers that go, hold on, maybe we shouldn't do this, get immediately squashed. We saw it happen. One of the dudes, what was it? It was a corporal that like was talking about how Israel is an ally that demands far too much from America and is dead set on implementing the Greater Israeli Project, the Greater Israel Project, and like exterminating Palestinians. Boom! Immediately, JNS writes an article about his posts, and he's gone. He's gone the next day. That is way, way more consequential than a normal ally or a simple vassal state. England can't do that. Okay? England cannot do that. France, laughably, cannot do that. Germany, not corporal, colonel, sorry, I said corporal, colonel. There is no other country that has this level of prominence and control in a simple advisory role. And it's insane because Israel would not exist without unlimited support from the West.
Iranian regime obtaining a nuclear weapon, knowing how they behave without one, and countenancing what it would be like if they did have one.
Do you think that the US bombing Iran had to be legal under international law? Do you think that's an important principle?
It's important that all countries obey by international law. I imagine the calculation in this case would have been one based on self-defence and the calculus of interests around that. Our particular interest would be in the legality of any British action, which in this case has not been something we've been involved with.
Yeah, like, look. Breaking, the U.S. officially removes Colonel Nathan McCormick from his position at the Joint Chief of Staff for post calling Israel a death cult and saying America is acting as Israel's proxy. He was right. He is right. He is quite literally right. The power is still very much in the hands of the American state. America controls Israel, okay? But this doesn't mean that Israel and pro-Israeli elements within American governance have not gone into this with a insane calculation that goes along with Israel's own personal ambitions in the region. Israel's own personal ambitions in the region might correspond to American interests in the region, but the reason why this is fucking happening is because Israel has taken the advisory role and is leading the charge. It's like having your attack dog control having your dog control you. It's like having your child slap you in the most American in the most American terms. It's like when, you know, American children will call their parents by their first names and will throw a fucking tantrum, and then the American parents have nothing to say in that process. It's like Israel is that child throwing a tantrum.
Yet. There's a possibility, isn't there, that the time comes where UK forces are deployed in some capacity.
I think it isn't helpful to speculate on.
Just accept the fact that U.S. spent more on military than the whole world combined. Live with it. They say jump, you jump. Be real on yourself. What do you mean? Iran funds terrorist organizations. It affects the whole Western world. Yes, dude, you're right. Keep coping, okay? Keep coping. They told you that. They told you that so you don't get health care. So all of this money is spent on dominating this region. That's what it is. And you eat it hook, line, and sinker every time, okay? Iran is a regional player in the Middle East. It is an oil producer. Iran has been destabilized by Western interests time and time again. That's why the Iranian Revolution took place in Iran as a consequence of previous destabilization and the coup that was implemented by England and America, okay? And every step of the way, they justified all of these things that they did to Iran by telling you it's dangerous, it's scary. That's it. And you ate it. You ate the propaganda. You ate the propaganda, and you're like, I'm terrified of Iran. Iran has done nothing to you, dumbass. Nothing at all. We've done everything to Iran, and Iran has done basically nothing in return. That's why it's always funny when people are like, death to Iran. They're saying death to America over there. They're saying death to Israel. It's like, of course they're saying that. Look at what we've done to this country. Of course they're saying that. You want death to Iran, and they ain't done shit to you. Your government has done shit to Iran. Of course they're going to say death to Israel, death to America.
On those situations, clearly there is an interest now in calming this down, in de-escalation, in stability. Of course, we'll always defend our own interests. We move assets to the region to be prepared in order to make sure we can defend British personnel if that was something that we needed to do.
Jonathan Reynolds, thank you very much for your time. Well, Professor Ali and
resistance groups that are destabilizing Lebanon and Yemen, heck yeah. No, totally. The Lebanese population, the Shia population of Lebanon should have just been ethnically cleansed in the Maronite Christian sectarian infighting that was taking place, that was significantly beefed up by Israeli forces and then literally contributed to and supported by Israeli forces. After they should have just like eaten it. They should have just had Sabra and Shatila happen. They call it Sabra and Shatila massacre, but that's analogy for it, you know? The Lebanese population have no right to self-defense at all. They cannot arm themselves against Israeli invasion. Notice how Israel is always, in your assessment, packaged as a force of nature. Like Israel gets to invade any country it wants to, and the citizens of said country are not allowed to engage in any kind of self-defense whatsoever. Because when you say resistance groups that are destabilizing Lebanon and Yemen, the irony is Lebanon would already be Israel, okay? It would be a part of, especially southern Lebanon, would be a part of the greater Israeli state project if it wasn't for Hezbollah. Hezbollah was formed out of the necessity to defend against Israel. The notion that Hezbollah is somehow an alien force that has nothing to do with the Lebanese population is insane. Same with Yemen. I wonder who's destabilizing Yemen. Is it the Yemeni Shia population that was engaging in a civil war, in a power grab caused by the very unpopular Saudi-backed leadership of Yemen. Perhaps that had something to do with it. And they were also propped up by, of course, American weapons. Who's destabilizing Yemen, you think? Saudi Arabia participates and may have funded the attackers that did 9/11. Al-Qaeda is the terror group that did 9/11, took responsibility for 9/11. America funded and gave weapons to Al-Qaeda in Yemen because Al-Qaeda and its militancy was working alongside Saudi Arabia in Yemen because it's a Saudi group, it's a Saudi-backed group. Who was doing the destabilization there? The Western forces, the Western proxy forces? It's ridiculous. America and Israel have nothing to do in this region. It's just like these guys are always just a bunch of barbaric sand people, barbaric desert people that are fighting each other all the time, right? That's what it is.
The founding director of the Institute of Iranian Studies at St. Andrews University. He joins me now.
Now, when you go to...
What do you think Iran is going to do next? Are they going to try and seek an off-ramp or escalation? What do you think it's going to be?
I think they will probably try both. I think they will seek privately to get an off-ramp. I think they're pretty shocked by what's happened. I think at the same time they will probably, in public at least, indicate all sorts of things that they will do, including, as we've heard, about the Straits of Hormuz, and then also possibly attacks on American bases.
You think they will actually try and target American troops?
I think they will be considering that. I think they're going to be highly reluctant to draw the Americans further in. I mean, there are no good options for them. Let's be honest.
And in terms of the Strait of Hormuz, just explain the significance of that for us, because that could end up with everyone paying a lot more for oil, right?
I think it could be. I mean, I think it's a difficult option for them because obviously it's sort of cutting off their nose to spite their own face in this respect. A lot of their own oil exports go through the Straits of Hormuz, and of course it could be reopened in fairly short order. So it's a threat, and I think at the moment that's where we're at.
I mean, the supreme leader of Iran is going to have a lot on his mind, isn't he, tonight? Because Donald Trump has effectively threatened to kill him.
He has, and I mean, I think one of the problems, I think, for many Iranians is that the supreme leader's obviously gone into hiding, and one can understand to some extent that he's obviously extremely concerned, but it's not a great, for many Iranians who have been left really without any form of civil defense or protection, it's probably very worrying.
But if he does escalate and Donald Trump carries through that threat, we're looking at the fall of the supreme leader, and do you think that means the fall of the Iranian leadership as we know it?
I think the regime has some very, very difficult choices to make. If it wants to survive, it probably needs to find an off-ramp fairly quickly.
I mean, how strong or indeed weak does Iran look right now? It looks like, it's lost its influence in Syria, in Lebanon, and overnight it can't even defend its own airspace.
I think one of the more shocking things that will probably be settling in Tehran, friendless they appear. There are some voices of concern from regional allies, but there's very little actually going on that's supporting them. They have really lost, I think, in the last 2 decades, they've lost a lot of regionals.
You said Khamenei is dead. Do you mean this literally? What are you saying? No, that one chatter said Khomeini, thinking that Ayatollah Khomeini, not Khamenei. God damn, dude. Fucking shut up for an hour. You keep spamming the same shit over and over again. Ayatollah Khomeini has been dead for a while. Khamenei, the current Ayatollah, is not. That dumb fuck chatter who was trying to justify America's bombing in Iran couldn't even fucking say the correct name of the current Ayatollah. My point was that person is stupid. That person is demonstrating the stupidity of the average American who doesn't know where Iran is, who doesn't know who the Iranian leadership is, doesn't understand anything about Iran, but is simply trying to fucking defend these unjustifiable actions.
Well, the foreign minister of Iran is off to see President Putin. What's going to come of that?
He is, but President Putin has proved a very reluctant ally, I have to say. I mean, he's basically said, I think at one stage that the Iranians have never asked for our help, so we're not really, I think they can handle it on their own. Putin, obviously, at the moment, has got his own preoccupations. I think the Iranians may look to China, but at the moment, there doesn't seem to be any sort of substantive help coming their way.
What's your sense of how durable, then,